Montana Territory, August 1879. The blood on her cheek had dried to a dark crust by the time she stumbled out of the cottonwoods, barefoot and limping, into the path of a lone rider. He reined in hard. "Jesus," he said, voice low and steady. "What happened to you?" She blinked against the sun. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, lips split, hands trembling. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, the hem soaked in blood and mud. She had no shoes, no coat, and only one word left in her. "Help!" The cowboy dismounted fast, his boots crunching through dry brush as he crossed to her. He had a kind face, young but weathered, with dark blonde hair and eyes like Wyoming sky. He didn't ask again. He just knelt and reached for her gently, like she might break. She tensed. "Do not touch me. I am not going to hurt you," he said, lowering his hand. "You can lean on me if you want. Or not. But we need to get you off this trail before the sun drops." She tried to take a step and crumpled. Her knees hit hard, and she cried out, gasping. Her legs would not hold her. She could not stand, let alone walk. He caught her before she hit the ground fully, arms strong and sure beneath her. "You cannot walk from your bruises," he said, lifting her into his arms like she weighed nothing. "So I will carry you, and I swear to God, you will never crawl again." She pressed her face to his chest, shivering. "I am Hayes," she whispered after a long silence. "Hayes Sutton." He looked down at her, jaw tightening. "I am Yorke Barrett. You are safe now." He carried her half a mile on foot, talking low, steady things about the trees and the wind and the way the creek curled through the hills. She faded in and out, but his voice kept her tethered. When they reached his camp, tucked in a hollow behind some rocks, he laid her down on a bedroll and built a fire with practiced hands. He made no sudden moves. He did not ask questions. He just warmed a kettle and ripped strips from his own shirt to clean her cuts. "Tell me if anything feels wrong," he said, holding up his hands before touching her. Hayes nodded, dazed. "It all feels wrong." He gave a small, quiet breath. "Yeah, I figured." The worst of the bruises were around her ribs and thighs. Her ankles were scraped raw. She winced when he dabbed her temple, but did not pull away. Yorke worked in silence, his touch careful, eyes never straying from hers unless she looked away first. By nightfall, she was wrapped in his coat and tucked beside the fire. He gave her his only blanket and sat beside her, knees drawn up, rifle across them. "Were you running from someone?" he asked softly. She did not answer for a long time. Then, "A man who thought he owned me." Yorke nodded once. "Is he still out there?" "I think I killed him. I hope I did." He did not flinch. "Then he earned it." They sat quiet after that. The fire cracked and popped. Somewhere to the north, a coyote called. "You were riding alone?" she asked. "Yeah." "Why?" "Looking for work. My brother and I used to run cattle out this way. He died last spring. I could not stay in Utah after that." She looked at him, really looked. The sadness in his face was quiet, deep, not loud like hers, but it was there. He had known loss. "You have people?" he asked. Hayes shook her head. "Just my son, Samson. He is 6. I hid him with a ranch woman west of here before I ran. I had to be sure he was safe before I did what I did." Yorke turned toward her, voice soft. "You want to get back to him?" She nodded, eyes filling. "More than anything. Then we will get you there." "How?" "I will carry you if I have to." She stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" Yorke looked into the fire. "Because I saw you, and I could not ride away." That night, she slept. Not well, but enough. Yorke stayed awake, watching the shadows shift. In the morning, she tried to stand again. She wobbled, caught herself on his shoulder, then sagged. Still not ready, he said. Come on. He lifted her again, arms cradling her like a bride. She did not resist this time. Her head rested against his neck, breath warm on his collarbone. They rode together, her balanced in front of him on the saddle, wrapped in the blanket. Hayes whispered directions through the trees, guiding him toward the ranch she had left Samson at. They passed through cottonwoods and over dry creek beds. Once, they saw riders in the distance, but Yorke turned them off the trail and waited until the dust settled. By the third day, her legs were healing slow. She could stand for a few seconds, maybe longer, but walking was still too much. Each time she tried, Yorke was there. Steady hands. No judgment. You are not weak, he told her. You are healing. On the fourth morning, she woke to find him cooking something over the fire. He had traded for eggs and bread at a homestead nearby. You did not have to do that, she said, voice rough from sleep. I wanted to. She watched him, the way his hands moved, the way his shoulders stayed relaxed around her now. He trusted her, and she was starting to trust him. I do not know how to repay you, she said. He looked across the fire at her. You do not owe me anything. I think I do. He stood and brought her the plate. Just get better. That is all I want. Hayes took the food, hands shaking a little. Yorke. Yeah. If I had not run. If you had not found me. I was meant to, he said simply. She looked down at the eggs, heart thudding. She had never believed in fate. But maybe she could believe in this man. In his steady hands and quiet voice and the way he never looked at her like she was broken. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something she could hold on to. They reached the edge of the ranch land by late afternoon. The slope opened into a wide basin where brittle grasses swayed under the wind, and a stone chimney rose above the cottonwoods like a watchtower. Hayes pointed toward a slanted barn roof in the distance, her voice thin. There. The woman's name is Cora Bell. She took my boy in. Yorke didn't answer right away. He studied the land between them and the ranch house, noting the worn trail that cut through a small ravine. A few cattle moved slow through the field, heads down, ribs showing. You think she's still got him? He asked. If she let him go, she'd have sent word. She's not the kind that forgets a promise. He nodded once, then helped her down from the saddle. Her feet touched the earth gingerly, knees braced. She stood upright, teeth clenched, and started forward. Yorke kept close but didn't offer his arm. She didn't ask for help, and he'd learned enough in those days to know she wouldn't until she had no other choice. They walked through the gate in silence. No dogs barked. No one came to meet them. Hayes knocked once on the door, then stepped back. A long pause, and then it creaked open. Cora Bell was older than Hayes, remembered hair streaked with silver, apron damp with what smelled like soap and lye. Her eyes widened when she saw Hayes, then softened as she looked her over slowly. Well, Cora said, voice low, I wasn't sure if I'd see you again. Hayes swallowed. Is he here? Cora stepped aside. He's nap pin. Come in. Yorke stayed on the porch while Hayes crossed the threshold. The house was warm with the scent of cookfire and old pine. A child's quilt lay folded on a rocker. Hayes's breath hitched. She followed Cora down a narrow hall. At the end, in the glow of a shuttered window, a small boy slept curled on his side, thumb tucked near his mouth, one booted foot dangling from the bed. Hayes stepped in slow, heart thudding. She didn't speak. She just reached for the boy's hand and held it in silence. After a while, she turned back to Cora. Thank you. Cora's arms were crossed, her gaze unreadable. You didn't leave much behind but a name and a bruise on your jaw. I couldn't say more. I figured as much. They stood quiet a moment, both watching the boy. Then Cora said, You staying? Hayes glanced toward the doorway. I don't know yet. Well, you'll eat before you go. Out on the porch, Yorke leaned against the rail, eyes on the field. He didn't turn when the door creaked open behind him. You didn't have to wait, Hayes said. I know. She stepped beside him. Her face was clearer now, less drawn. She looked out over the land, where the light turned golden across the hills. I thought about him every minute I was gone, she said. All I could think was, if I died out there, he'd never know why. Yorke's jaw moved once. He'll know now. They didn't speak for a stretch. The wind had shifted, carrying the scent of rain from the mountains. Cora says we can stay a few days, Hayes said finally. You want to? I want to see him smile again. Yorke nodded. Then we'll stay. She looked at him, something heavier than gratitude in her eyes. You don't have to stay. I know, he said. But I want to. That night, they ate at the long table beneath the low rafters. Samson woke just before supper and ran to his mother without hesitation, arms flung wide. Hayes held him close, her face buried in his curls. Yorke didn't look away. Supper was cornbread and beans with salt pork. The boy chattered beside them, asking Yorke if he'd ever seen a bear, if he could tie knots, if he could teach him to ride. Yorke answered every question, slow and patient. Hayes watched him, a strange ache blooming in her chest. After Samson fell asleep again, she walked Yorke to the barn. He'd bedded his horse there, beside the Bell family's old roan. She stood in the open doorway, arms folded. I've never seen him talk so much, she said. He's a good boy. He wasn't always. Before I left, he wouldn't speak at all. Yorke leaned on the stall rail, brushing straw from his coat. He's speaking now. Hayes stepped inside, closer. The barn smelled of earth and old wood, the air settling between them like an exhale. I don't know where I'm meant to go next, she said. But I know I don't want to go alone. Yorke met her eyes. You won't. She nodded once, then turned toward the door. Before she stepped through, she paused. I don't know how to be with someone after what I've come from. Yorke didn't move. His voice was quiet. Then we'll learn slow. Together. Hayes didn't speak again. She only looked at him, her face open in a way it hadn't been before. Then she walked out into the night, and this time her steps were steady. On the 5th morning, the rain came. Not hard, but steady, the kind that softened the dirt and filled the air with the smell of wet bark and sage. Yorke worked early, patching a loose hinge on the barn's side door with spare iron and a length of rawhide. Hayes watched from the porch, her shawl tucked tight around her shoulders. Samson curled asleep inside. You always fix things that aren't yours? She asked when he returned to the stoop, hands streaked with rust. If I'm staying in a place, I don't like to see it fall apart, he said. Besides, that wind last night nearly tore it clean off. She stepped aside to let him pass, her fingers brushing his sleeve. You slept out there? Figured Cora needed her space. And it was dry enough in the loft. She doesn't mind you. She minds all men until they give her reason not to. I don't blame her. Hayes didn't answer, but her eyes lingered on his hands as he poured water into the basin beside the stove. His knuckles were scraped, a fresh welt forming near the wrist. That from the hinge? He nodded. Caught it wrong pulling the nail. Doesn't hurt. She took a strip of linen from the shelf and soaked it in warm water without asking. When she wrapped it around his wrist, her touch was deliberate, her gaze held steady. I used to do this for my father, she said. He worked with fence wire and always came home bleeding. What did he raise? Nothing. He built for other folks. Corrals, porch beams, windmill towers. Never had land of his own. Yorke flexed his fingers gently under the cloth. Sounds like he left early. He did. Fever took him in the spring I turned 12. She tied the linen in a small knot and stepped back. My mother remarried a year later. That's when things started going wrong. He didn't press. She didn't offer more. That afternoon, Samson woke with a fever and a cough that rattled. Cora brewed willow bark tea and rubbed turpentine on his chest with steady hands. Hayes sat beside his bed, brushing his damp hair back, her lips barely moving. Yorke brought in more wood without being asked. When the boy's fever crested near dusk, he fetched cold water from the creek and helped soak the rags that cooled his skin. "Did you ever have a boy?" Hayes asked, voice low, her eyes on Samson. "No, my brother did. Little thing, red hair and a loud laugh. He didn't make it past his second winter." "I'm sorry. So am I." They sat quiet for a moment, the fire casting long lines across the floor. "Cora's going to let us stay on a while," Hayes said. "She needs help with the smokehouse. I offered to cure her salt pork in the fall." Yorke nodded. "I'll help with the fence line out past the orchard. Some of those posts are leaning bad." "She'll appreciate that," Hayes said. Then, "So will I." The next day, the boy's fever broke. By evening, he was sitting up, eating broth and whispering stories to himself about horses that could fly. Hayes stepped out behind the barn after supper, the light thinning to silver along the ridge. Yorke was there, sawing a length of cedar into fence rails. She didn't interrupt him, just waited until he set the saw down. "You keep working like that, she'll never let you leave," she said. He wiped the back of his neck with a rag. "I'm not in a hurry." She stepped closer, boots sinking into the soft earth. "I'm not sure I know what to do with someone like you." "What do you mean?" "You don't ask for anything. You don't push. You just stay." Yorke leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You've had men take more than they gave." "Every one," she said. He nodded, slow. "Then it's time you knew different." The wind picked up, blowing strands of hair loose around her face. She tucked them behind her ear, eyes on his. "I keep expecting you to leave. I keep waiting for you to ask me not to." She looked down, thumb grazing the edge of her palm. "I can't promise you much, Yorke. I've lived too long with things breaking. I'm not asking for promises." "What are you asking for?" He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing until she could feel the warmth off his skin. "Just time," he said, "and room near you." She didn't speak, but her hand found his, fingers threading into his slowly. He let her take the lead, and when she leaned in, her forehead resting lightly against his chest, he held her with care. "No rush, no demand. I don't know how to be soft anymore," she whispered. "You don't have to be," he said. "You just have to be real." They stayed like that until the stars came out, the sky wide and open above them, and the only sound was the hush of wind through the grass and the slow, steady rhythm of two hearts learning to beat beside each other. The first frost came in the second week of September. It laid a silver veil over the pasture grass, and the mornings turned sharp enough to draw breath from the lungs. Hayes rose earlier now, not out of habit but from a need to keep her hands moving, her thoughts tethered to the ground beneath her feet. She and Cora hung strips of venison along the smokehouse rafters, rubbed salt into pork shoulders, and folded sacks of dried apples for winter stores. Each evening, Samson sat at the table beside Yorke, carving blunt little animals from cedar scraps. Yorke taught him how to hold the blade firm, how to read the grain before pressing into it. Hayes watched from the hearth, her mending in hand, a quiet stillness settling over her chest she hadn't known she could carry. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, Hayes led Yorke through a trail behind the orchard, where the trees thinned and opened into a narrow bluff overlooking the creek. She'd found it by chance, years ago, back when she'd first come west with her son, and nothing more than a canvas satchel and a name she no longer spoke aloud. "Place like this," she said, brushing a leaf from the low stone wall. Makes a person feel like the rest of the world's holding its breath. Yorke crouched beside her. You used to come here often? Only when I couldn't think straight. It's hard to lie to yourself in quiet like this. He didn't speak, just rested one hand on the stone beside hers. I thought if I ever got free, she said, voice low, I'd feel nothing but relief, but peace doesn't come like I expected. What does it feel like instead? Like I'm still waiting for something to break. Yorke looked at her, eyes steady. Then maybe it's time to build something that can't break. She turned toward him. You think that's even possible for people like us? I do. You say that like it's simple. It's not. But it's worth trying. She sat down on the bent grass, legs folded, the stone cool behind her back. I've spent so long surviving, I don't know what else I'm good for. You're good at raising that boy, he said. You're good at work, at reading the weather, at knowing when to speak and when to wait. You're better than most folks I've ever known. She looked down, the wind pulling at the ends of her shawl. You haven't seen the worst of me. I've seen enough. They sat in silence as the sky dimmed, watching the way the clouds caught fire along their edges. He didn't reach for her, didn't move closer. He only waited, letting the stillness fill the space between them. When they stood again, she didn't pull away when his hand brushed hers. That night, as Hayes tucked Samson beneath the quilt, he reached up and touched her face. Are we staying here now? She smoothed his hair back. Would you want that? He nodded. I like Mr. Yorke. He listens. She smiled, a small, worn thing. He does. Outside, Yorke was splitting firewood by lantern light. The noise was steady, measured, each strike deliberate. Hayes stepped onto the porch and leaned against the post, arms wrapped around herself. You ever think about buying land? She asked. He paused mid-swing, then lowered the axe. Sometimes. Would it be here? If it meant I could see you every day, then yes. She took a breath. Cora offered to sell me an acre behind the orchard. Said she'd rather see it grow food than weeds. Yorke walked to the porch, lantern swinging in his hand. You thinking of taking it? I might, but not alone. He stopped at the bottom step. You asking me to stay? I'm asking if you want to make something with me. Something that doesn't come from running or pain. He stared up at her, face lit by the glow. Yeah, I want that. She stepped down, closed the space between them, and reached for his hand. I don't know how to love easy, she said, but I can love honest. That's all I've ever needed. They stood in the cold, hands joined, the world narrowing to the heat between their palms and the sound of the wind curling through the orchard. Hayes looked at him then, really looked, and knew this man had never asked her to change, only to share what she already was. She leaned in slow, and when their foreheads touched, it wasn't a question. It was a promise. Behind them, the house stood quiet, smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, their boy slept safe. Around them, the land waited patiently, ready to be shaped. And for the first time since she'd run, Hayes didn't feel chased. She felt home. By early October, the soil behind the orchard turned workable again. Yorke and Hayes laid out lines with twine and stakes, marking space for winter greens and spring beans. The land was uneven, but it took to their effort like it had been waiting for someone to care. Samson helped where he could, trailing after Yorke with a small tin bucket, collecting stones from the furrows. His cough had faded, replaced by a soft hum he carried while he worked, some tune Hayes didn't recognize but didn't want to silence. One morning, as frost clung to the fence rails, Yorke stood at the edge of the plot with a rolled map in his hand. He'd walked to the survey office in town 3 days earlier and brought back a deed proposal from Cora. Now he unrolled it across the table inside the main house, smoothing the creases with his palm. She's offering the land at half what she could get for it, he said, tracing the boundary line with his fingertip. Says she'd rather see it worked than let it sit empty. Hayes leaned in beside him, her hands still dusted with flour from the breakfast bread. We can't pay her what it's worth. She knew that. She said what we give back in labor will more than square it. Hayes studied the marked corners, the small stream noted along the southern line. We could build a root cellar just east of the slope. Maybe even keep a few hens next spring. Yorke glanced at her. You saying yes? I'm saying I want to build something that outlasts the both of us. That afternoon, they brought the signed paper to Cora, who looked it over without ceremony. Then folded it once and slid it into her ledger. I'll have the notary stop by before week's end, she said. You two best decide what kind of roof you want before the snow comes. They chose cedar planks for the frame and local stone for the hearth. Yorke took the lead with the tools, but Hayes set every beam with him, shoulder to shoulder. She knew how to brace a post, how to drive a wedge when the grain split wrong. He didn't comment on her precision, only passed her what she needed and trusted the way she worked. Some nights they worked late, lanterns swaying from nails pinned to the unfinished rafters. Samson stayed inside with Cora when the air turned biting, learning to read from a Bible with the cover nearly worn off. When Yorke and Hayes returned from the build, they'd find him asleep by the stove, a wool blanket tucked under his chin. One evening, as the last of the roof shingles were laid, Yorke climbed down the ladder and set his hand to the doorframe. Hayes stood nearby, arms crossed, her sleeves rolled to the elbow. It's not much yet, he said, brushing sawdust from his shirt. But it's standing. She stepped closer, reached up, and touched the lintel with her palm. It's more than I ever thought I'd have. You still sure about it? He asked. I'm sure about you. Yorke didn't answer at first. He took her hand, rough and calloused like his, and held it steady. I've got 2 horses, a rifle, and $5 left to my name, he said. But I'll give you all I've got, every day. I don't want more, she said. I just want you. And Samson wants you, too. His eyes softened. I want him. He's already mine in every way that counts. They stood in the doorway of the half-finished house, the wind stirring the grass behind them, and kissed for the first time. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't rushed either. It was certain. Her hands slid to his waist, his found the side of her neck, and they held each other like people who'd been waiting too long to be held right. They were married by the creek 2 weeks later. Cora stood witness on one side, Samson on the other, holding a ring Yorke had carved from a coin. No preacher came. Hayes didn't want one. She said vows didn't come from a book, they came from what you did when no one else was watching. Yorke promised to be there when the roof needed patching and when the boy woke crying. Hayes promised to stay through quiet winters and long rains, to speak truthfully, even when it hurt. They exchanged the ring and shared a kiss that sealed it all. The first snow came soon after, blanketing the hills in silence. The roof held. The hearth lit warm. Samson's laughter echoed off the rafters as he chased a wooden dog Yorke had carved for him. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and stew. Hayes sat beside the fire, her feet tucked beneath her, needle working through a new quilt. Yorke sat across from her, boots off, sharpening a blade with steady strokes. She looked up and caught his eye. You happy? He nodded. More than I ever knew I could be. She smiled, slow and quiet. Me too. Outside, the wind moved through the orchard like a lullaby, and the windows glowed against the dark. Within those walls, there were no ghosts, no shadows from the life behind her. There was only warmth, the steady breath of a sleeping child, and the man who had never asked her to be anything but herself. They lived on that land for the rest of their days. They planted and built, raised Samson into a man with strong hands and a kind heart. The house grew, room by room, shaped by love and labor. Neighbors came to know them as steady folk, ones you could ride to in any weather. And though the years brought hardship as years always do, they never brought loneliness. Because Hayes Sutton and Yorke Barrett had found more than safety. They had found home, together, forever.